The Fort Erie Podcast with Brent Jones. Brent Jones starts now.
That is me. Hello and welcome. I'm Brent Jones, and this is episode 72. Previous episode 71, I announced the launch of a brand new Fort Erie podcast merchandise store. In today's episode, I'm going to give you a chance to win a free t-shirt from that merch store. We're also going to be tackling some Fort Erie news today. Going to play your Byrd Box messages. We'll talk about this month in Fort Erie history. And my guest on this episode is going to be Christopher Schoenwald. He's a former Fort Erie resident, now resides in Japan with his family. And a few episodes ago, I referenced all the different podcasts that I was aware of that were hosted by somebody connected to the town of Fort Erie. And I invited all of them. Anybody who was listening, I said, hey, listen, if you are a Fort Erie podcaster, there's not that many of us. I invite you to collaborate. You know, let's work together. I can either come on your show, you can come on mine. Well, the only taker was Chris. He hosts a podcast called Life as a, which focuses on different career pathways and gets into the nuts and bolts of what's involved in different careers. I don't want to spoil too much of what it's about. I'm going to let Chris talk about that later. But Chris was nice enough to have me on his show to talk about life as a realtor. What are the ins and outs of working in real estate? I'll play a clip of that coming up during the real estate feature today. I'll play a clip of me on Chris's show, Life as a, but I'm having Chris on the Fort Erie podcast now, not only to tell us more about his podcast. That'll be the first half of our chat today. I've split our chat into two parts. So the first part, we'll talk about his podcast. And then later in today's episode, we'll get to the second half of our discussion where we'll talk about some things he misses about home, misses about the town of Fort Erie, and some things, you know, that he wishes he could bring back with him from Japan as well. So a bit of compare and contrast. What's it like to live here and what's it like for him to live on the other side of the world? Now, you may have noticed before we get into things today, you might have noticed that our Wendy's on Garrison Road is currently getting a facelift. I've been kind of watching because the Wendy's is directly across the street from my office here at RE/MAX. It's been, I don't know, a week or so at the time I'm recording this. It feels like forever, maybe 2 weeks. I'm not sure. They're modernizing the property, and I hate that. I get that this happens with fast food chains, franchises. They do this every couple of years. But when I think of fast food chains, in my mind, I get very nostalgic. I will never forget my earliest memory, for example, of McDonald's, which was back in the 1980s. I can still vividly remember there was like cream-colored tables and chairs, and they had sort of light pink and light blue accents. And I had to Google this just to make sure that my memory wasn't incorrect. No, my memory, as I remember as a small child seeing the inside of McDonald's, is exactly right, including the menu, the menus behind the cashiers or the customer service people, the McDonald's people. The menus were brown with like white lettering on them. They had a tile floor throughout McDonald's that resembled almost like a brick pattern. It looked like you were walking on a brick wall. And the floor, as I remember, was always covered in grease. And McDonald's always smelled like pickles, like the pickles that go on the burgers, no matter the time of the day. And now all these McDonald's, they look so modernized when you go in. Like the menu, I hate these new digital menus. I'm sorry to start off this episode on a negative foot, but I can't be the only one who thinks this. When I go into a fast food place and they have these, these really bright digital display menus, and they keep changing. The images keep changing. Like, and this is especially bad when you're going through the drive-thru. You pull up at the drive-thru and you're doing a quick scan of the menu just to make sure you know what you want to order, but you just want to make sure you get the name of it right or see if it comes in a combo. And it's like every 3 seconds, these menus are changing what's actually on the screen. It's super annoying. Half the time I have to tell the person at the drive-thru, please just give me a sec. I'm waiting for your menu to flip back to what I actually want to see. But everything now inside McDonald's is so polished. It's like not just our McDonald's here in town, but all of them. I find if you go into a McDonald's, it's like you're walking into a 5-star hotel. There's fancy lighting, there's bar stools, there's dark accents. They're pushing something now at McDonald's everywhere called McCafe, because apparently McDonald's wants to compete with Tim's and Starbucks for its share of the morning coffee market. And I'll be honest, like the coffee at McDonald's is pretty good now, even though historically, like, when I was a teenager, when I first started drinking coffee, McDonald's historically has had the worst coffee of any fast food chain. So it's nice to see that's come a long way. But some of these fast food restaurants, including McDonald's, they even have touch screens. Now you go in to order and you're not talking to an actual person behind the counter anymore. You're like punching in your order on a touch screen. It's a bit like bagging your own groceries or checking out your own stuff at Walmart. There used to be an old joke when I was a teenager that you could get a job at McDonald's as long as you could just say those simple words. You want fries with that? But now you don't even need that skill anymore. Customers enter their own orders. You don't even have to ask them if they want fries. So I don't know. It looks to me, peeking out the window here, like Wendy's is following suit. They're going to upgrade. They're going to modernize. I'm not sure if they're doing the interior as well. I can only see the exterior from my office, but I guess time will tell.
Fun and games on the Fort Erie Podcast.
For this round of fun and games on the Fort Erie Podcast, I thought I'd give away some free merchandise. Last week, I announced that there's now a merchandise store available for the Fort Erie Podcast where you can buy things like t-shirts, hoodies, tanks, trucker hats, toques, buttons, mugs, notebooks, iPhone cases, and the proceeds from all merchandise sales between now and Christmas Day, 100% of it is going to be donated to Strong Fort Erie Neighborhoods, a great nonprofit here in our town. You can shop all that merchandise. You can either access the merchandise store one of two ways. You can go to theforteriePodcast.com and click the merch link at the top of the page, or you can just type right into your web browser merch, that's MERCH, theforteriePodcast.com, and either way, it'll take you to the merch store. Anyway, I'm going to give away one of the white t-shirts today. Your choice of size is totally up to you. Here's how this is going to work. It's really, really easy. On the weekend, my dad sent me a song that he found on YouTube, and this song came out like 9 years ago. It's probably the silliest song that I've ever heard. It has absolutely nothing to do with the town of Fort Erie, by the way. Let me just play a short clip from it here. You'll figure out what this song is called just based on the lyrics, and the job I'm giving you, dear listener, is to tell me who is it that sings this song? Who is the artist? Check it out.
Well, my body could use a little slimming. I keep my shirt on when I go swimming, and I ain't seen my feet since 1984. The old lady wants to roll in the hay. We turn the lights down all the way, 'cause I don't look good naked anymore. No, I don't look good naked anymore. I'm a deep-fried double-wide version of the man I was before. If I keep on like I'm doing, I won't fit through the door, and I don't look good naked anymore.
Do you know who that is? Do you know who the artist is? If not, let me just remind you, dear listener, you probably figured out what the song is called, so now you can cheat and use Google. I really don't care how you arrive at your answer. I just want you to take your answer and call it in to the Byrd Box, 289-599-2973, or that's 289-599-BYRD, Byrd. Leave a message, take a guess, and everyone who calls in and takes a guess, even if it's not the correct guess, you'll all have a chance to win this t-shirt, okay? And if you're the only person that calls in, well, you win, whether your answer's right or wrong, okay? So
Fort Erie Real Estate with Brent Jones, your friendly local realtor with RE/MAX Niagara Realty.
thinking back, it's been a little while since the last time I did a real estate feature here on the Fort Erie Podcast, but I do have a few things to update you on today. First and foremost, something positive. Let's start with this. I've got a hot new listing to tell you about. I just listed 87 Waterloo Street in Fort Erie. That's a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom semi in the south end of town. It's got a full basement, a partially fenced backyard. There's lots of updates throughout this home. The paint, trim, flooring, that was all done just recently, just in the last couple of months. New light fixtures. There was a kitchen reno done a couple of years ago, some newer appliances. This is an ideal starter home investment opportunity, or even an upgrade for a growing family, really. This property is available for immediate possession. That's 87 Waterloo Street in Fort Erie, asking $389,900. You can call or text me for more information or to book a viewing. My number is 905-626-8826. You can, of course, look this listing up online, or you can just contact me directly, 905-626-8826. Now, the next thing I wanted to touch on is the September real estate data is in, and it is official, folks. Niagara is officially a buyer's market. First time this has happened in quite some time. We went from an extreme seller's market throughout the course of the pandemic to a more balanced market late into 2022 and thus far in 2023. But under the weight, the pressure of added interest rate hikes, another interest rate hike looming for October 25th, and inflation trending back upward, there are more homes currently sitting on the market right now in the town of Fort Erie than there have been since something like 2014, like 9 years ago. Homes are sitting for longer. They're taking longer to sell. At the time I'm recording this, there are almost 400 homes for sale in the town of Fort Erie, and this is creating opportunities for buyers at the negotiation table. And by the way, I will say, when realtors, when we talk about, it being a seller's market, a buyer's market, a balanced market, that's not just marketing hype. I think sometimes that's what people think. These are just phrases we throw out to try to drum up some business. But no, there's an actual formula for this. And it goes like this. If you take the number of homes that were sold in any given month and then divide that number by the number of new listings during that same month, if that number that you arrive at is greater than 60%, that is a seller's market. Peak pandemic, that number was as high as 95%. That was an extreme seller's market. If that number falls between the 40 to 60% range, we would call that a balanced market. And if that number is below 40%, we have a buyer's market on our hands. Well, for the month of September across the entire Niagara region, that number was 27%. So definite buyer's market territory. Now, my chat with Christopher Schoenwald is coming up in just a moment. What I thought I would do first is I'd play a short clip of my appearance on his show, the Life as a Podcast. We talked all about life as a realtor. And Chris asked me something on his show, he asked me about something I've previously said on the Fort Erie podcast. I've made the claim before, and I've said it half in jest, but what I've said is real estate is nobody's plan A. And he wanted to know what I meant by that. So have a listen to my response on his show. I'm going to play that right now, and then we'll dive straight into the first half of my chat with Chris on this show.
The Fort Erie Podcast.
And speaking of some non-traditional ways of how you engage with the community, you have your own podcast, the Fort Erie Podcast. Again, researching for this talk, I was listening to that, and there was a segment there where you were speaking about your line of work, and you made this comment that I felt was fairly compelling. And I believe it went something along the lines of, real estate is nobody's plan A. So my question centers on this sentiment and, again, how you ended up doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, so there's kind of two questions there, I guess. So tackling the first one, real estate is nobody's plan A. I've been fond of saying that over the years because, especially selling real estate in a small town, you get to know, and just for context for your listeners, of greater Fort Erie, the town of Fort Erie is like 34,000 people, give or take. And that's where I concentrate the majority of my marketing efforts, the majority of my time. And one of the things you'll find is that you end up very often doing business with the same other agents in town over and over again. You get to know people, you talk with them. I can't think of a whole lot of examples of where people as little kids, little boys and girls, 5 and 6, said, man, I want to be a real estate agent when I grow up. I don't think that's the case. I've certainly never met anybody where that was the case. What tends to happen more often than not is because, again, as I kind of alluded to earlier, the barrier to entry to become a realtor is relatively low to at least do the initial registration. I actually heard one of my mentors once told me in Ontario, it takes 200 hours of class time to become a realtor, 2,000 hours of class time to get licensed to cut hair. So our barbers are actually 10 times more qualified than our realtors, as crazy as that might sound. So I think what attracts people, I think a lot of times is they end up as sort of a crossroads in their life or their career where they're looking for something new to try. And they know somebody maybe who's been successful in real estate. So they say, let me give this a go. And what you'll find is, as with most sales positions, you'll get sort of a portion of people who will figure it out and will rise to the top. And then there's a percentage who will go, no, this isn't for me. And very often people figure that out early in the coursework.
You're listening to the Fort Erie Podcast.
All right, joining me right now by Google Meet, I'm speaking with Christopher Schoenwald. Chris, how you doing?
Great. Really looking forward to this conversation today, Brent.
Hey, well, thanks for joining me. And of course, usually when I introduce guests, I mention that they're joining me by phone. But you, of course, sir, are on the other side of the world in Japan. What time is it right now where you are?
It's about 6 a.m. Yeah, I'm an early riser, so that's no problems. But yeah,
you are dedicated joining me here on the Fort Erie Podcast. I appreciate that. Well, I'm kind of breaking my one rule today because usually my requirement to have somebody on the Fort Erie Podcast is that they either live or work in Fort Erie. Ideally do both, but you do neither. But you did grow up here, correct?
That's right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I spent a good 25 years, of course, living there and growing up and being embedded within that community. So yeah, that's home.
And where in the world are you now and what took you there?
So as you mentioned, yeah, I'm in Japan. I'm Western Japan at the moment. So it'd be about an hour bullet train ride outside of Hiroshima, Japan. And I've been here for about 20 years in the country itself. But I've been in Tokyo for 6-7 years, I guess it was, and then down in this other region, Western Japan, for the remainder of that time. And, I think at one point, when I was living in Fort Erie and finishing school, finishing university, didn't exactly know what I wanted to do, but I did know I wanted to travel. And I kind of thought, well, might be an interesting place to explore, Japan, Asia itself. So I kind of signed up for that 1-year plan of traveling, experiencing, working a little bit while I was doing it, paying off some student loans. And that 1-year plan kind of turned into a 20 plus year plan, kind of fell in love with the place and ended up here, it's endless exploration in every sense of the word, really. So yeah, it kind of started off innocently, and then it kind of grew from there to the point where now I've settled in, have a life, have a family, have everything set up over here. But I got to say though, I mean, Fort Erie and Canada as a whole, it's never far from, my thoughts. I get back every single year, basically, whether it's summer or whether it's winter. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
No, it absolutely does. And one of the things that always tickles me is that, I don't know, is this a joke that you guys tell, like in your neck of the woods? Because, me, I would naturally say, I'd say Hiroshima, but I notice you and probably everybody else who actually knows what they're talking about would say Hiroshima. And so is that like how you tell whether somebody is like a cultured Westerner or a slob? Is that how you guys tell us apart, or what?
Well, I don't know. I mean, like, I guess after being here for some time, you pick up the language a little bit, and, and how things are being pronounced, and, some of the sounds here phonetically, how they come out. Yeah, I guess you would pick up on that, but you don't necessarily identify someone as like, oh, they don't know anything, because, how would you otherwise? A lot of the people that do come over here, we make the same mistakes, at least initially too. So, it's a time and effort sort of thing, over the course of time of learning, you pick up on these things, but yeah.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to speak with you, Chris, I actually kind of plugged your podcast quite a few episodes ago. I was talking about all the podcasts I know that are sort of based out of Fort Erie or hosted by somebody from Fort Erie. And you do a podcast called Life as a, which I just played an excerpt. You were kind enough to have me on your show, played that earlier in today's episode. So for the benefit of listeners, can you talk about Life as a podcast? What is it about? When did it start? Who was it for?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to do so.
For sure.
So Life as a is a podcast, as you said, and the aim here is to really help people, and mainly it's youth or mid-career professionals, kind of get a handle on, the different opportunities that are out there, in terms of professional development, businesses, and careers flat out. I think for myself, this is traces back to my own history. Again, when I was finishing university, I came out with a sociology degree, and as a lot of people would probably guess, like, it doesn't exactly lead into a particular profession. You really have to go back to school, or you have to really specialize from that point. And I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And that caused a bit of angst, I would say, and frustration at times. And I just got thinking, over the course of, several years, it would have been nice. It would have been handy to have a resource where you could kind of explore different careers, different lives that are attached to those careers. Because oftentimes, we're devoting so much of our life to a particular profession that it ultimately, shapes our worldviews. It shapes our relationships with different types of people. It alters our life, in essence.
For sure.
And yeah. So I thought it would be really interesting to kind of explore that, to speak to people who are, one, embedded within their world, in those worlds, in their professions, in their career, figuring out what drives them, figuring out the roles and responsibilities, and then how those things affect their lives, and I think that big picture look at it all would be really helpful to someone who is, feeling a little conflicted over making these big life decisions. And that's kind of where it started. It was kind of born out of the pandemic. Had a little extra time on my hands over here, and I just started speaking to people the world over, basically, and I wanted that perspective from people from Europe, from Asia, from North America, from all over the place, because oftentimes even a profession, what you're doing in one part of the world, it could be the same title, but, you're doing it elsewhere in the world and things might be a little bit different. So I wanted to explore those aspects as well. So that's kind of where it started, and it's just grown out from there. Pretty close to 100 episodes now, and they're good 45 to 60-minute chats. We really get into, what it means to be a teacher, what it means to be a doctor, any profession you can think of, basically. I'm eager to kind of explore it all and to help provide perspectives on it. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, it does, because I was going to say, I mean, I've gone through some of your back catalog, almost 100 episodes at this point, and you talk to everybody. I mean, you've got a wide range of different careers. These are in-depth conversations, not just snapshots. And how do you go about, you mentioned, I mean, you have guests that come from, from Asia, from North America, from Europe, from all over the place. How do you end up sort of networking and connecting with so many of these interesting people in different fields?
Yeah, great question. Some of it comes from just a lot of hard work and perseverance, almost like cold calling, really. Like I find them on a platform like LinkedIn, which is a professional, social networking platform itself, where you can kind of like dig in and find people specifically. And, sometimes people want to chat about what they do. They don't get enough opportunities maybe to really explain, what it is they do. And human nature, I think people take pride in a lot of their work, especially if they are proud of it,
Oh,
so
sure.
I think that presents an opportunity there. But then also too, like when I have these conversations, a lot of times people will say like, oh, I know this great person who does X, Y, Z. They'd be perfect for your podcast. And I'll get this really nice, warm introduction to that individual. And it just kind of grows out from there. And, I'd be lying if I said isn't a little bit of strategy as well. Sometimes you go for some of these higher profile individuals or come from professions that are a little bit trickier to access. And, you go after this individual, which then can lead on to somebody else who is connected. And you kind of play that game also. So, there's a few different strategies there, but to be honest, it hasn't been all that hard. And I think, again, it just traces back to people want to speak about what they're doing. They want that respect. I think it's human nature. So yeah, it all sort of fits in.
Well, I like that answer, and you obviously have a diverse range of guests on your show. I'm going to guess that your listenership may be diverse as well. Do you have any sense of how many or what percentage, kind of what share of your listeners maybe are from Niagara or specifically Fort Erie? Because you must still have people listening in this area, I would think, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think this the friends and family support thing that happens there. And then also too, like I'll draw upon that. I mean, as you mentioned already, I've spoken with you. Fort Erie is a special place for me. Again, it's my hometown. It's where I grew up. So I like to tap into that and to speak with people from that area, because it's also a nice opportunity to have conversations about the region and to promote it as well. And that's something I really, get a great level of satisfaction in doing. So as far as like from the Niagara region, I don't have stats off the top of my head. I'm not sure. I haven't even checked recently. But as a whole, I mean, regionally, I would say within Ontario, it's a significant portion of the listenership comes from that region. Absolutely. Maybe even upwards of a third, maybe, of listeners tune in from that area. So, yeah.
Okay. So there is certainly a local tie-in there. I go the other way. I love stats. And so I'm trying to look at podcast stats every week for the Fort Erie podcast. And one thing I notice, I use Libsyn. So, I mean, I don't know how the stats reporting compares to other podcast hosting platforms, but I see that every week, just about every week, I get one download, like one listener from Japan. And I always wonder if it's you or if I actually have somebody else in Japan that likes listening to the Fort Erie podcast.
Well, yeah, I'm definitely tuning in. So that's probably me. But, like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I can't hit them all. I get busy. I get things going on. So, maybe you're growing out there. I don't know. Maybe you're getting a few different fans. I probably chatted about this podcast here and there with different people. So, hey, you never know.
Well, it could be. Hey, let's make sure listeners can find you. So your podcast is in all the usual places: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn. What about the website? Because you put together a lot of additional material in the show notes and stuff. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, so it's lifeasa.com, and in between the words life hyphen as hyphen .com. If you just check that or just do a Google search for life as you're going to be able to find it. Like I said, we've been going for a little while, for a couple of years now, and starting to finally get some traction in terms of Google search. So yeah, you search for that, you're going to be able to find it. And you're right. I mean, I do offer some different resources there on the actual website. So I have the podcast itself, but then also recently I've been doing these 15-minute sort of highlight video conversations that just sort of pick apart different points within the conversation, and you can watch along on YouTube and just kind of taking the content in a different manner. So you can also listen along on YouTube as well.
Right, because you do. I should have known this having been a guest on your podcast, but you do the video thing as well, which is something I've never endeavored to do. But do you find the response is pretty positive? You must, if you're still doing the video piece. It's a lot of work to edit and do the video part too. So your listeners have sort of come to expect that there's a video component to your show then.
Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, I think that's still a work in progress, but from my research and from what I'm learning, like people like to take in content in a lot of different ways. So if you like listening, if you like podcasts, that's going to be your thing. That's your jam. That's what you're going to do. But other people don't really get into the whole podcast thing. They like visual. They want to see. They want to take in the content in that manner. So I just like to have that option. And to be honest, like that, again, the video side is still a work in progress. Strategically as well, like ultimately where I would like to see this going, outside of just sort of like tickling the interests of people that are curious about just learning about different lives, different professions. I ultimately have this aim of getting this content into educational systems, districts, boards of education, perhaps, where, the people that would probably be most would gain the most benefit from it, youth, right? People in high school, even university as well. But mainly I would say high school, where they can access this content and just sort of sample careers, So ultimately having both video, having audio for people that, if you're on the go and you don't have time for a 60-minute, 55-minute audio podcast, well, here's a 15-minute sort of sampler for that content. If you like more of it, well, you can dive into the podcast itself and get more information. So there is a little bit of strategy there. And so any of your listeners who are within education that are, intrigued by this idea of offering this type of content to students, as a way for them to maybe gain some direction, gain some inspiration, I think that'd be something too that I'd certainly be interested in exploring. So yeah, I'd welcome anyone and everyone who has similarly minded thoughts to hit me up anytime.
News on the Fort Erie Podcast.
We'll get right back into my chat with Chris here in just a moment, but first, let's talk about what's making news in our town. I think the big story over the past week was the fire that broke out on the third story of the Ridgeway-Crystal Beach High School, former Ridgeway-Crystal Beach High School, I should say. This happened on Thanksgiving weekend. At the time I'm recording this, there's still no official word on the cause, but I can say living fairly close by, the response time from fire crews was swift and effective. You can find photos of the damage online or take a drive by. You'll see that the windows were blown out on the third floor. A 25-year-old Fort Erie man was charged after a double stabbing earlier this month. 2 people were hospitalized. The stabbing occurred after a verbal argument escalated, and investigators are saying the victims and the suspect knew each other. Probably not a big surprise. Former Crystal Beach resident Patricia Mason is making news again 7 years after the death of her husband, who drowned in Lake Erie. In that time, she's been pushing for private beaches to be mandated, to have to inform beachgoers when it's not safe to enter the water due to high winds and currents and, conditions she says contributed to her husband's death. Now, let me be clear. Her husband's death is tragic, of course. I don't mean to make light of that, but something tells me that a warning sign being put up or something along those lines probably would not have prevented a grown man from getting in the water. Last week, a truck carrying 65 hairdryers attempted to cross into Buffalo from Fort Erie. U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers at the Peace Bridge in Buffalo seized all of them, all the hairdryers, on behalf of the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Apparently, these hairdryers did not have what's called integral immersion protection, which is required by certain safety laws. A Fort Erie woman named Simone Bailey is recovering after being struck on her motorcycle by a car on Niagara Parkway at the end of September. She's looking for 2 Good Samaritans who came to her aid. If you have info on this, the article doesn't mention how to communicate that information to Simone, but this article was penned by Allison Langley in the Niagara Falls Review. Maybe reach out to Allison and see if she can help. Back on October 3rd, a 13-year-old boy from Fort Erie was arrested and charged with 2 counts of motor vehicle theft and 1 count of failure to stop at the scene of an accident causing bodily harm. Apparently, this kid stole 2 family vehicles and went out for a joyride. Anyway, anyone with information about this incident is being asked to contact the police by calling 905-688-4111, press option 3, and then extension 10 22 300. Town Council shut down a proposal for a pilot project to permit hens in Fort Erie's more rural areas. The idea was that, this pilot project could later be expanded into urban areas of the community as well. Mayor Wayne Redekop was particularly vocal about his opposition. He was concerned that the noise and filth caused by chickens could cause disputes between neighbors. That's probably a pretty good call. And lastly, I'll mention if you're heading out of town and hoping to find your way back, just be aware that the Niagara-bound lanes on the Burlington Skyway Bridge will be fully closed on October 20th, beginning at 9:30 p.m. through to 11 a.m. the next day. Anyway, coming up next, we're going to be talking about what happened this month in Fort Erie history, and then I'm going to play your messages. Folks, the messages you've left on the Byrd Box, we'll get to those. And then coming up, we'll jump right back into my chat with Chris. We're going to talk about what he misses most about the town of Fort Erie, what he wishes as well he could bring back to Fort Erie from Japan. That's all coming up.
This month in Fort Erie history.
Well, this month of October began with record-breaking temperatures. Niagara District Airport recorded the temperature at 28 degrees Celsius back on October 3rd, and the previous record for October 3rd before that was set 40 years ago in 1983, when temperatures hit 26.3 degrees. But this month in Fort Erie history saw a different type of record, and I'm talking about October of 2006, and that record was for snowfall. So back in 2006, this precedes my time in the town of Fort Erie, but I'm sure many of you will recall Thursday, October 12, 2006. The day began with rainfall, not unexpected for the month of October, but the temperatures dropped into the evening throughout the day, which ultimately brought heavy, wet snow that fell for hours right into the following day, Friday, October 13th, 2006. The end result was something like 30 centimeters of snow that fell in Fort Erie and Port Colborne, which is pretty wild when you think for the middle of October, you've barely raked up leaves and you've got 30 centimeters of snow. Now, Fort Erie got it bad, but if you think that's bad, Buffalo got it a lot worse. It says here in this article I've got pulled up that that same storm, October 12, 2006, Buffalo got 22 centimeters of snow and then another 35.5 centimeters of snow on October 13th for a total of over 57 centimeters of snow. That was definitely a record for Buffalo. The previous record had been set more than 100 years before that, October 31st, 1917, and that was only 15 centimeters back in 1917. Imagine getting 57 centimeters plus back in 2006. There was so much snow in Buffalo that ultimately the Peace Bridge was closed. Now, right now, it's pretty seasonal. We're getting nice days. The temperature is what you'd expect for this time of year. I don't think we'll be breaking that record this year for snowfall in this town. But if you follow the Farmer's Almanac, and if you believe it, you already know we're expecting a cold, snowy winter ahead. Same thing if you follow, many of you I know may follow Lee Moore online. You probably know him better as the Angry Beekeeper on TikTok. He's been posting videos for a while now, predicting weather patterns based upon what he sees his bees doing. The activity of bees is often a good indicator of what weather is coming on the horizon, and he's also predicting that this is going to be a tough winter. So if he's right, this might not be a bad time, Fort Erie, to get your winter tires, get your snow tires put on your car.
It's Fort Erie's answering machine, the Byrd Box.
Welcome to the Byrd Box. This is the part of the show where I play your voicemail messages. I like to call the Byrd Box Fort Erie's answering machine because you can call 24 hours a day. You can squawk about anything you like, and then I play those messages right here on the Fort Erie podcast. Could be good, could be bad, could be something you saw around town, something on your mind, whatever you want. But today, the messages all kind of have a similar theme. These are callers who wanted to give some feedback on different local businesses. Let's start with this one right here.
I wanted to give a shout out to Lauren at Ink Bar Tattoos. She did my tattoos. I haven't gotten a single one since because I don't trust anybody but her because she does a fantastic job.
Well, good. That's high praise for Lauren at Ink Bar. That's great. And if you do find somebody, a tattoo artist that you're comfortable with, I mean, hold them close, right? Because it's not even just about the quality of the work the tattoo artist does, the cleanliness of the facility. The other part of it too, sometimes is just if you're dealing with a person that, sort of gets your creative vision for what you want done. So yeah, I've never dealt with Ink Bar personally, but I've heard good things. So thanks for the call. That's great. Here's another caller with some kind things to say.
There are a few hidden gems. One of them is left of Central. It's a board game cafe on Jarvis Street, the corner of Jarvis and Central. 206. Jarvis Street. It's a family-friendly board game cafe, a great spot to go. They serve food, coffee, tea. I think they even have an alcohol or a liquor license now. Another one, Sessions on the River. It's a full-service recording studio with attached bar lounge. It's such a beautiful spot, 133 Niagara Boulevard.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd call those hidden gems. I mean, I think most people know Left of Central and Sessions, but they are great spots. I mean, Left of Central, I actually thinking about saying it out loud. I don't think I've actually been to Left of Central since it opened, like close to when it first opened. I understand the menu is expanded now. There are beer options, but my experience going there is it was a comfortable environment, friendly staff. There were lots of games. Yeah, I mean, as far as a board game cafe goes, I mean, I think it's great. Sessions on the River, I talk about all the time on this podcast. There are various events going on. They've always got something going on, but I've never actually been to Sessions, believe it or not. I really should one of these days. And what a great spot, by the way, on Niagara Boulevard for a recording studio. Anyway, this last message I'm going to play, I almost didn't play it. I almost didn't want to play it. It also talks about a local business, but with some not so nice things to say. In a previous episode of the Fort Erie podcast, I've mentioned that The Barrel makes my favorite pizza here in town. It's also no secret. Dino Kentros has been a guest on the Fort Erie podcast. If I had to pick a second choice, maybe 335 on the Ridge would be up there too, a very close second, but their pizza is definitely a different style than what you'd get at the Barrel. Anyway, this particular caller took issue with my choice of favorite pizza. Have a listen.
If you think that the Barrel is better, you really got to give your head a shake. You may as well eat a half-cooked piece of pizza and chew nothing but dough.
Wow. Yeah, like I said, I almost didn't play this message because I don't want to disparage local businesses on the Fort Erie podcast, but I've also said during this segment repeatedly that you can call for any reason you want, good, bad, or otherwise, and you can, 289-599-2973. So, but dude, honestly, I mean, the Barrel's packed every night of the week. There's a line out the door. The place has been in business since the 80s. Like, do you think it's because their food is bad? I mean, you have to understand personal preference plays in a little bit here, but objectively, the Barrel makes good food. You know, this sounds like a caller who probably went like one time, had a bad experience for whatever reason. Instead of bringing it up with the wait staff or whatever, you know, just decided to be mad about it and hold a grudge forever. And the other thing too is, dude, like, you know, you can ask them to cook your pizza well done too, right? You can ask them to cook it for a little longer. I mean, if that's what your picky little princess mouth prefers over there, I mean, you can ask him to cook your pizza well done. Anyway, this call was ridiculous, but nonetheless, great use of the Byrd Box today, guys. You can call in anything you see around town, good, bad, or otherwise. Get your messages in, 289-599-2973.
Have something you want to squawk about? Let the whole town know what's on your mind. Call the Byrd Box at 289-599-2973. That's 289-599-BYRD.
And I thought it would be interesting to get your perspective as having lived, and I'm estimating here, but approximately half your life in Fort Erie, and we'll say half your life abroad. I was curious if we could sort of compare and contrast the experience. Are there things that you love about our town that you miss because you do come back to visit often? But then at the same time, are there things we go, hey, there's stuff going on in the town of Fort Erie or maybe Niagara as a whole that I wish I could bring overseas? Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, definitely. I got to start with Tim's, you know, Tim Hortons. You know, I miss that, you know, the coffee itself, but then just the culture of what all of that is and what it represents, you know, stopping in to your favorite Tim's or your closest Tim's and, you know, seeing the same types of people there, you know, there's something special there. And it's something that I don't experience here within Japan. Like the level of service here is awesome. It's off the charts. But the feeling sometimes is what's, I'd say, lacking, maybe.
Sure.
And you know, I think there's something special there. If you lived your whole life in Canada, you might not notice that, or you might not think too hard about it. But I tell you what, it's something that when you're away from it, you do notice it and you do miss it a little bit. Outside of that, you know, it's some of the festivals as well, the community aspect. I think it was last summer, 2 summers ago, I got back in time for a festival in Ridgeway. You know, and just getting down there and walking the street and seeing the food vendors, seeing the vendors selling different things. Like, it's just like a nice community feeling. And you know, certainly we have these festivals over here in Japan, and they're different. They're intriguing in a lot of different ways. But it's nice to see the community coming together in a place like Fort Erie and how everyone's pitching in and helping out and just the friendly atmosphere and vibe of it all. I mean, that's something as well that I've really come to appreciate. And maybe it's a byproduct of getting older. You start to pick up on these things where you value them that much more. But food would be another, some chicken wings, pizza, all that good stuff,
What's your go-to spot, if I can interrupt? What's your go-to spot in Fort Erie for wings? What are your favorites?
I grew up in Crescent Park, so the place was always just, quick and easy, access-wise. It wasn't too far. So they always had great wings. And for me, I would probably go there. Although, I've heard a bunch of other places like South Coast as well. It's awesome wings. And, to be honest, it's one place I haven't been to just yet. And I'm almost ashamed to admit that on the 40 podcast here. But I've been meaning to, and I'm really dying to. And hopefully next summer when I get back, that'll be one of the first places to get into. But
well, that's kind of funny because just behind the scenes, you also had Phil Smith, who owns South Coast, on the Life as a podcast at one point. He doesn't know. You've never been?
I haven't been to South Coast. Yeah. Nobody tell him. But he's been on Life as a. Yeah,
that's amazing. But anyway, I love your wing choice. The place is great, but please continue. If there's other things you miss, go for it.
The Friendship Trail as well. That's something I remember growing up, cycling on quite a bit, going all over the place on that thing. And again, getting a little bit older now, still trying to stay as fit as I can. I'm taking up jogging the last couple of years. And when I do come back, I'm, staying with my mother and visiting with her quite a bit within, again, the Crescent Park area, and just hopping on that trail and having a nice jog through, the Waverly onto the lake shore. It's scenic. It's beautiful. It's something that I really, really appreciate now. And again, when I was young, these are things that you just kind of took for granted. But it's absolutely stunning. And that's something that I really do miss. And I love how it just wraps around and you can go so many different places on that. And just the safety of it all as well, taking the kids out on there as well. I guess kind of shifting over into things that if I, could bring back. Back with me.
Yeah, things you think people in Fort Erie would go, hey, it's this place that Chris lives now, an hour outside of Hiroshima. What kind of great stuff would you love to bring over here and let people in Fort Erie experience?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, kind of on the heels of that, what I was just speaking of, the Friendship Trail, there's this region here within Japan that, Japan itself is an island nation, and there's a series of islands that make up what Japan is, right? Mm-hmm. And where I live in particular, I'm located on the inland sea of Japan. And there's another main island about 70 kilometers off the coast. But in between, there's a series of islands, and they're all connected by these huge suspension bridges. The two towns that lie at both ends, one of them is about 30, 40,000 people, not overly big. And for a while, it was a town that was kind of decaying. It was just people weren't going there. It wasn't a lot going on. Now, on the other end, it was a town of city rather, of say 80,000 or so. So regional areas in Japan were struggling for a little while. And what happened several years ago is that these townships, they kind of came up with this idea that they were going to take advantage of all the natural beauty and amenities that region offered, which was for them these beautiful islands, creating access to them. And they ended up creating this world-class cycling route that starts in either end, either town, and it's connected by this just blue painted course that you can cycle along all the way through. But what makes it special and what makes it unique is the fact that they have, cycling depots along the way. So you can rent bikes and drop them off at different points along the way. They also have bus pickups as well. So if you don't want to go the full 70 kilometers, you can catch a bus back to your starting point or to the end point. And what's happened from this is that there's been a lot of development along the way. You have small businesses, little cafes that have popped up. You have other bicycle shops that have come around. You have bed and breakfasts that have evolved all the way through. And the last I checked, I think it's a top 10 cycling course in the world. You have people, avid cyclists who are coming all over the world to experience this. But not only that, you have just regular tourists who have also discovered it and online or elsewhere and word of mouth, and they come to do portions of it. And it just got me thinking that getting back to Fort Erie and the Niagara region as a whole, I know they do some of these things like renting bikes and whatnot in Niagara on the Lake, for example. But we have the infrastructure to do something like this. I can think like Fort Erie itself. Like I could imagine that being like a nice connecting point along the Parkway, right up beside Niagara Falls. You could continue on into Niagara on the Lake. Like it is an opportunity. I really think it's an opportunity. And a few years back, like I was kind of just digging around trying to find a place just to rent a bike for a day. And I think like there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, I like that. And you know what? It's I'd be curious to bring that up maybe with Niagara Parks, because they're always promoting it's 140 kilometers, right? The Greater Niagara Circle route, which I cycled in 2016. I did the whole thing, and it's that it is interesting. You say it's like this route is promoted, but there's nothing really along it that makes sense for. I shouldn't say nothing, but there isn't anything sort of structured the way you're describing.
Yeah, the infrastructure, like there's. Online, there's brochures as well that there's information centers along the way that help promote the area, promote the local businesses, the scenic spots along the way. So you can see it from an economic perspective that it would make sense, but then also too, just for like the memories that it could create for individuals that are taking part in this. This one might be a little bit more of a serious one, but like it's I don't know. Like I benefit from the fact that I've been, as you said, like half my life now abroad, but then growing up, having half my life within North America, within Fort Erie, within Niagara. And you start to like recognize these points that you like in both cultures and things that, are a little bit less desirable. And I'd say one of them over here that I've come to really appreciate, at least within Japan, are some of like just old fashioned values, I would say.
Sure.
And, things that I think back in the day, like within North America, we had, but I don't know, they got lost or they got kind of thrown to the side. So,
what kind of stuff? Like holding a door open or like that kind of thing. What sort of stuff you mean?
I'd say like just overall respect, for different people, for others. Maybe it is that, holding a door open, but also too, it's just like care for one another. If I'm in a cafe, say here within Japan, and I'm sitting there with my MacBook and my phone, my sunglasses are there on the table, like I would not give it a thought about if I have to use the restroom, just leaving all my stuff there and then coming back and not even worrying that anything would ever be taken. There's a respect for other people's privacy, property, those types of things. That'd be one example. Like just crime in that sense is just so low. People it doesn't even cross their minds here, I would say, all that often. And certainly there's some bad eggs, but generally speaking, like it's not things that you would worry about. Whereas, in North America, those types of things have started to creep in, and, you have to be a little bit more careful, obviously. Even like students here, when they are from elementary school age, they're involved in cleaning their own schools. Like they don't have janitors coming in. The students will pick up brooms and brushes, and as a student, you might not like that, but also at the same time, they're being taught the value of respecting, others, just respecting property and pitching in and doing things. And
sure.
that sense of entitlement isn't necessarily there. And again, I think these were values that we once had in North America, but somehow they've just been, pushed off to the side a little bit along the way. So
sure. I like it. Anything else you want to add to the list?
What else? I guess food as well. Food is a nice one here too. People might think sushi, sashimi, like raw fish, that's what's eaten every day. Well, yeah, people do eat that, but that's not the main staple. Of course, rice would be part of every meal. People here eat a lot of meat. They love meat. There's barbecue restaurants all over the place.
I've
There's
heard that.
Fried food like tempura, all sorts of stuff. But the key here is like the portion sizes. They don't go crazy on that,
Okay.
And then like the health benefits of what that means, as compared to within North America. I love it, but after about a week of eating that stuff, you really got to watch it. It just comes down to portion sizes, or even things with sugar. I'd say here sugar is halved. It's about half or even a quarter of what we would use. And those sort of like hidden elements to our culture, you got to be careful. You got to be careful. And I think we're seeing some of those challenges, those issues, I suppose, again, within North America and other European nations as well. Whereas in Japan, people are relatively fit and healthy. And I think that's a bit of their secret right there. So just moderation, going to a coffee shop without sugar being everywhere, added without even asking.
You started off by talking about how much you miss Tim Hortons, and then ended with less sugar. So it's I don't know, Chris. It sounds like there's no winning, man.
It's a nice observation. I'm just a coffee guy, though. I don't go for the sweets. So
that's fair. Yeah. What do you take in your coffee? You just drink it black?
Just a medium coffee with milk.
Yeah,
there it is, man.
Very good.
Yeah,
that's great.
That's all I need.
Well, I'm looking for you're going to be back in town next summer. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I hope there's an opportunity to get together with you there. Is there anything else you want to share with listeners before we wrap up?
If anyone does have an opportunity or an interest in life as I would definitely appreciate a listen there. And, maybe it's not for you per se, but if you know somebody who is conflicted, who doesn't know necessarily what they want to do with their lives, or maybe they want to make some changes, they want a career change. Yeah. I ask them, encourage them to go check it out. There's a lot of great content there, a lot of great guests. And hey, if you ever make it to Japan too, be sure to look me up. I'd be happy to provide any information that I can if you're interested in exploring this region of the world.
The Fort Erie Podcast.
I've got a joke for you, Fort Erie. Are you ready? What do lawyers wear to court? Lawsuits. Thing about dad jokes is you either love them or hate them, man. But I love these punny, cringy jokes, man. They always make me chuckle. I think I was just built for dad life because this is my kind of humor. How do you make an egg roll? You push it. Come on, you laughed at that one a little bit, right?
Get off the stage. You suck.
Anyway, that's our episode for today. I don't know why I've got a list of dad jokes pulled up in front of me, but there you have it. Give Christopher Schoenwald a follow on social media. He's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you can find his podcast, Life as all the places that you'd expect, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the places you'd find the Fort Erie podcast as well. Check out Life as You can check out the episode that I was on, or pick a different one with somebody maybe more interesting. You hear enough from me already, I imagine. While you're at it, while you're online, while you're browsing the interwebs, maybe grab some Fort Erie podcast merchandise. I know I've posted the links on my social media, but you can also just go to theforteriepodcast.com, click the merch link at the top of the page, grab yourself a t-shirt or something, because until Christmas Day, all the proceeds from merchandise sold are going to go directly to strong Fort Erie neighborhoods. If you'd like to leave a punny joke on the Byrd Box, I'd love to hear that. Leave me your best dad joke, 289-599-2973. And as a reminder, earlier in today's episode, I played a song and I asked you to leave a message on the Byrd Box guessing who performs that song.
Keep on like I'm doing. I won't fit through the door, and I don't look good naked anymore.
Guess, get as close as you can. Leave a message with your guess. You'll have a shot at winning a free Fort Erie podcast t-shirt, your choice of size. Anyway, I think that will do it for today, folks. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.
You've been listening to the Fort Erie Podcast with your host, Brent Jones. Never miss an episode. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or visit theforteriepodcast.com.